Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Temel is a leisure and hospitality entrepreneur with business interests from fitness to festivals and hospitality to high-profile events, a reflection of his lifestyle and passions. He is also the host of the fabulous Off Script podcast. Ty completely embodies his role as an ambassador for mental health. He is actively making a difference to be part of the solution through motivating others to talk openly and shaping campaigns to target help and resources where they are needed. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Ty Temel, welcome to the Astrology Podcast. It's great to have you on as my guest today, and really looking forward to hearing more about you and indeed the story behind the story. But before we do, I think, as is customary with all things astrology, I like to start, for context for listeners, from the early days, childhood days. So inevitably leads to that first question as to perhaps where did you grow up and what therefore was childhood like for you?
Firstly, Lee, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'll take it right back. So I was born in Turkey. I always say I was born in London because it changes people's perception. But we can delve into that a bit later. I was born in Turkey, in Istanbul. I moved to England when I was 2 years old. So my mum and dad moved here to kind of give me a better life, because in those days that Middle East region was almost as messed up as it is now, maybe worse. We came to London. We lived in London till I was probably 11. And I think my dad quickly identified that the areas we could afford to live in London were no better than Istanbul in that period. So he used to have a day off. He had like a little kebab van that he would drive around and park places with no permission, and they'd kind of move him on. Me, mum and dad would live in, we had one bedroom for ages, slept in the same bed, and we'd eat the doner kebab that he couldn't sell for the next day, breakfast, lunch and dinner kind of vibe. So it was kind of like early days. I mean, I've got memories of that, but I was very young. There'd be days that I could only afford to eat and they couldn't. So they'd feed me and not eat themselves, if you know what I mean. And then he would, on his day off or a few hours off, he would drive down effectively to the south of England to try and find like a nice seaside town for his son to grow up. They're both from 15 brothers and sisters each.
Wow.
So I've got loads of uncles and aunties. They're not all alive now. Tons of cousins, but loads of poverty, you know, like bowl of rice in the middle. If you eat quick, you're full. If you're not, you go hungry, which is why you'll find a lot of people from that lifestyle eat very fast, because if you don't eat, you go hungry because there isn't enough really to feed everyone. Anyway, driving around, and he ended up finding Swanage out of everywhere.
Had he any kind of connection with Dorset at all?
Whatsoever.
Right.
None whatsoever. My uncle kept coming down, and my uncle found a little spot to put his kebab van. He had one as well, my dad's older brother, in Bovington. It's like right by the army camp, because the squaddies love the kebab. So he was like, oh, this is all right. I'm making all right money here. You know, I'll park it here. So my dad kind of came down south to that region, Dorset, if you know what I mean, along the seaside, found Swanage. We moved to Swanage for a year, couldn't make it work, moved back to London. Swanage in those days was very, very one-dimensional. Like sort of, I mean, they call it God's waiting room, but it's home for me, if you know what I mean. But it was there was no Chinese restaurants when we came, no Indian restaurants, no foreign takeaways at all. It was very kind of middle-class white. So it was very hard integrating at first with everyone. Anyway, we found Swanage, we moved back to Swanage, and then we settled there. He had his kebab van. He bumped into met a guy called Mick Storer, who I give all the credit for, because we wouldn't have our foothold here if it wasn't for him giving my dad that chance to park his kebab van on a bit of his land, basically, because the council kept shooing him along. And and I basically started going to school went to school in London, obviously then moved to Swanage. London was a lot easier because you're around your own. So I've got cousins that still live in London, that are born in London, that don't speak as good English as me, because there's little pockets of communities that still haven't sort of integrated. But my dad wasn't about that. My dad was like, I'm coming here to provide a better life. So we need to integrate and we need to live the better life that you have in England. If we're going to come here and live by the cultures or the mindset that they have in the Middle East, there's no point moving here. So he was a very, very forward-thinking guy for his era, very forward-thinking. never kind of pushed any culture on me, never pushed any religion on me, never pushed any of that stuff. He just said, grow up, son. Here's my advice from what I've learned in life, but ultimately you make your own decisions and I'll support you, whatever you kind of decide to do.
Can you remember how that felt moving from, London, to your point, but the sheer size and scale, and arguably even allowing for the times to which you refer, the cultural diversity, to then come to a place, small seaside town like Swanage. How did you feel? That must have been a big culture shock from your perspective.
It was, but if I'm honest, I think I was too young.
Right.
So I was probably 10 or 11 or something when we came down. So I kind of, we were moving. I think it probably felt a bit exciting. We were by the beach. I hadn't seen a beach before. All I've ever known is the city until I was sort of 10, 11. So by the beach and it all seemed fun. I was out with my mum and, doing all these things, and mum and dad seemed happier. So that probably made me feel happier. But yeah, I don't really, I guess I only noticed it when I got to school. When I got to school and there wasn't very many people that looked like me, that's probably when I thought, oh, okay, like I'm somewhere different now. Because in London, it's the areas we lived, it was spot the white person, if you know what I mean. Whereas in the school I went to, I was the only guy with a tan and bushy eyebrows and, like dark hair. So it was a little bit hard integrating. On the whole, people were nice. There was a bit of bullying, quite a bit of bullying when I was growing up. But that, I feel like when I look back now, at the time I was angry and I got more angry with it when I got to like 18, 19, 20. But when I look back now, I'm 34 years old and I look back and I just feel that it's just because they didn't know any different. Not that I'm giving any credit to casual racism, but like if you've always grown up only seeing one thing, social media wasn't around in those days, television wasn't as big, programs weren't as diverse, accents, cultures weren't as educated in television shows. So that's all they know. And this guy turns up like me, him and his family, to them look really scary because they're all dark with loads of hair and, this kind of thing. And they feel threatened. And what do we do as humans when we feel threatened? We tend to attack. History will tell us that. We tend to attack when we feel threatened as opposed to try and understand. There's this thing in the military, the paratroopers use it. They say knowledge dispels fear. So we're always afraid of the unknown. I still am. You would still be naturally. That's how we're hardwired to survive in the old days when we're living in jungles. But obviously, once you have that knowledge, you don't have to be afraid anymore because you understand how it works. When I look back now, although it was quite tough, those sort of 12 to... Let me explain to you what I was like. So I was the kid that was short, fluffy hair, girls thought were cute, but nobody really fancied. And I couldn't hang around with the cool kids. I couldn't hang around with the not. I was like kind of floating in the abyss a little bit. Till I was probably year 10. Year 10, I went away for some holidays. I come back year 11, 6'1", chiseled, complete different guy. I come back into year 11 and all of a sudden it's like, who's this guy? Everyone's like, who's this guy? That's when my confidence started building. That's when I was thinking, all right, okay, yeah, I've got this, But yeah, it was an interesting experience.
And who were the heroes, if you like, the posters on the wall, the things you were into as a kid? Who did you look up to?
This is probably going to sound quite sad, but I didn't really have anyone like others did. Like like my missus might have had Spice Girls on her wall. I didn't really have any of that because I didn't know where I fitted. So I was whoever I thought would mean the kids would play with me. So if I had to smash a window with a stone for those kids to let me fit in, that's what I would do. If I had to pretend to be a player, that's what I would do. If I had to pretend to be a nerd, that's what I would do. Because I was lost a bit, if I'm honest, mate, until probably quite recently. Because I always just had this, I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to fit in. That was my biggest challenge in life. Just want to fit in, Dad. I just want them. I just want to. This roots back a little bit deeper, and I did a little work on this with the therapist. I wanted to fit in because I wanted to be happy, right? But when I looked around me, all the kids that I felt were happy, their parents were wealthy. So I thought. So, whether they're owning businesses, whether they're estate agents, whether they're this, whether they're that. So very, very early on, incorrectly, I linked financial success to happiness. So I always used to think, right, okay, Lee looks really happy. He's got lots of friends. All the girls want to date him. He's got a jet ski, his dad has. He's got this, he's got that. They've got lots of money, a big house, and they live on this part of Swanage, or wherever. So, okay, so as long as I get a bit of money, I'm going to be happy. And that's kind of probably where that drive into business comes from. A little bit from my parents and a little bit from that kind of fitting in element to be happy.
From my experience, I think that that's not an uncommon thought process. Yeah, if I look at where I grew up, I went to a classic English market town, small market town, comprehensive school with, 800 kids. And I think I was working this out the other day. I think we had, bearing in mind this is the 1980s, but I think we had one family of I think West Indian origin, two Indian families, I think one Bangladeshi family.
Where is this? What town?
In the New Forest. I grew up in the New Forest.
Wow. So that early on you had that mix?
Yeah, 4 from 800 kids. And when I say family, so probably, let's say less than 10 kids.
That's more than we had in Swanage.
A Fijian family. And every other kid, in the nicest possible way, looked like me.
Yeah.
So I don't have the benefit of that understanding of being, if you like, isolated and then trying to fit in from an external. So I don't understand that as I'm not hardwired. But I think you make a really interesting point around this perception that so many have that if you get to a point, oftentimes materially, you will be happy. And I don't think that that's an uncommon theme, regardless of ethnicity, gender, background, culture, whatever. I think that's a common theme amongst many.
I agree, yeah. And I think it's getting more common, sadly, due to social media and due to comparison. And
we perpetuate this myth of my perfect life, right?
Yeah.
Through these little windows into our soul, which we perpetuate online. Interesting. So at what point did you, I can make all sorts of assumptions around your father's work ethic and kind of entrepreneurial spirit, and we can apply all sorts of badges to it. But at what point did you start to, allied with your point around acknowledging that kind of monetary perception of wealth brings happiness, at what point did you start to display an interest or a thought process around business or making money?
I think really, really early on, and I think a part of this was nurture from parents. So all I ever saw, if you imagine it, Lee, all I ever saw is that you grow up, you set up a business. I never saw anyone going to university. I never saw any sort of higher education or even education as such. So very early on, I thought, okay, so the path in life is to grow up and set your own business up. That's how it started. And my dad, at the time, I used to be really annoyed with him, but he was extremely, extremely good at preparing me for life, extremely good. And there's two types of people in the world, right? There's people that are academically intelligent, and there's people that are street intelligent, like hustler, like can make stuff, make opportunities. And my dad was the latter. He never went to school either in Turkey. So he, very early on, he would do things, little things like we played a lot of chess growing up, and he would use that as life lessons, gets the strategic brain going. He would do mad shit, like tell me not to walk the same way to school twice. And I'd be like, Dad, we're in Swanage, not in Baghdad. As in like, there's nothing going to happen here. There's only one way to school anyway. It's a one-way system. It's a tiny little town. All these little things. We'd if we were at a pub or a restaurant or a cafe, he would give me the £5 note and say, right, son, go up. I want a coffee, your mum wants a tea, and you order what you want. And I'd go mad. I'd kick and scream, be like, Dad, I'm the kid, you're the adult, you're meant to go and order. And he'd say, no, son, do it. When I look back now, he was building confidence in me. He was effectively, I don't know what word to use, grooming in a way, but ready for life and how hard life is and the challenges in life. So I always had the tools to be able to help myself, even if he wasn't around, rather than babysitting.
I also think arguably the value of money, isn't it? You're at a very early age, you're starting to understand that if I have this in my hand, I hand it over, I get less back. That doesn't feel so good.
Yeah. He was very, very good at that, very good at all of that. And obviously he'd go to Macro a lot and Booker's to get stock for his thing. So I'd go with him and there's aisles and aisles of stock and your brain starts ticking and you're going back to this thing like this loop of I need to make money because I need to get my parents out of this hellhole they're living and I need to be happy. So I started really early on. I used to sell some penny sweets and cans of Cokes and stuff at school. I had like a bit of a ring going, like an old school, I think it's like Herbalife now, like a multi-level pyramid selling thing. And, the teacher called my dad in one day and said, Ali, his name's Ali, said, Ali, look, I don't know what's normal from where you guys come from. He's quite condescending to my dad and said, he set up a cartel in the school. There's kids selling in every class and every year for him. The tuck shop's taking a hit. Like you can't be doing this. They nearly expelled me for basically hustling. And in front of the teacher, my old man had a go at me in English. When we left and he's holding my hand and walking down the corridor, he said to me in Turkish, he said, son, ignore everything I just said in there, never change. Ignore them. The system is designed for you not to think for yourself. You carry on doing what you're doing. You're on the right path. And that kind of like ignited that in my belly very young. He was very good at giving you like empowerment. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Very good at that.
What do you think that early life equipped you with?
I think being humble, understanding the value of money, understanding people. He's a people person, still is. Like loves humans, loves people, doesn't care. There's a lot of different things I think I've probably picked up. I'd have to sit and think about it. I've never actually thought about it. It's a good question. But I would say like what I saw and what I had to learn was probably like, if you work hard, you're honest, you're authentic, you're going to get far. I'd probably say that's like the core of how Dad works. He's authentic, he's honest, he works hard. That's all I saw. And that's all I try and implement myself to the best that I can, you know.
And so what was the early career like for you? Because I want to come on to talk about opening your first nightclub and all this sort of in the entertainment industry and all the other things that you've done. But early career, what was that like?
Early career was a funny one because Dad always said to me, son, no one's been to university in our family. Go, you know, we're in a position now. You know, when I got to like 16, Dad now had quite a nice foundation. So we were more comfortable now, you know. He was like, go to university, son, I'll pay for it. No one's been. But even at school, I have a really short attention span. So I struggled to concentrate on one thing. I struggled with the academic system. They say to him, he's really intelligent, Ali, but he doesn't concentrate. But it's just because I got bored really quick. So I tried to initially make him, he was like, I don't want you to work in a family business. I don't want you to be a kebab man. I want you to go and do your own thing. And he said something really early to me that stuck with me to this day. And I think I was 16 at the time, 17. He said to me, son, pretend me and your mum aren't around. God forbid something happens and we're gone. What are you going to do to survive? He said, don't answer me. Just think about it. And he said, whatever you would do now. Do now. At least I'm here to protect you if something goes wrong. Whether that's legal, illegal, he was like, almost do what you need to do to survive, because life's about survival first and foremost. And at least I'm here that if it goes wrong, I'm your safety blanket. That gives you an immense amount of like confidence and power to think. It's like the old Lion King thing with the little cub with the lion stood behind him. So you're like, right, okay, let's go. But deep down in my heart still, I thought, I want to make him proud. So I thought, I'll try and study. I went to college a few times. I finished GCSEs, got like 7, never studied, never like prepared for any exams, got 7 GCSEs, did all right, flukily. Went to college, did civil law, financial planning, business management, tried all these things where I thought, oh yeah, I'll wear a suit to work, you know, and I'll look like, I'll fit it again, it's the fitting in thing. Couldn't do any of them. Did 6 months and I thought, the same for me, I just can't concentrate, it's not working. Then I thought, I'll get a job. I wouldn't mind wearing a suit to work, Dad. He was like, all right, son, try whatever you want. I've got a job in a bank. So I got a job at Barclays. I worked at Barclays Bank for about 11 months, about a year. Started off as a cashier, very good at talking, very good at gaining people's trust and getting them to open up, which is the key to selling. You're an ex-salesman. Once you can get them to trust you and believe in you, they'll buy from you. So very, very quickly, I became a personal banker, had a car and used to drive around all the branches that were underperforming and would upsell, basically. That come crashing down when I found out that even as a manager, you only get 25 grand a year. So I was like, that doesn't quite fit what at that period, my aspirations were to be super comfortable and happy, right? And to be happy, I had to have tons of money. 25 grand a year, although average wage, I think, was 11 in Swanage. 25 seemed pretty banging, but it wouldn't even afford the car that I look at my neighbor driving. So I came out of there and I struggled morally with that job a little bit because sales jobs, as you know, are target driven. So like, this is where it goes back to what we said before the podcast about the empathy and feeling people's pain. You know, I think the pinnacle for me was a young girl, a lady came in she's a single mum with a kid. And I'm sat there and I'm, 18 years old, something like that. And she's crying her eyes out that she's overdrawn and she can't pay her rent. She can't do this, she can't do that. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, right, what we need to do for this person is this. But my boss is saying, extend their overdraft. We're about to hit bonus. That would take us over. And in my head, I'm thinking, I remember speaking to her and I was like, look, I'm going to extend this woman's overdraft. She's going to be back here in a month with nowhere to live. I just can't do it. And she was like, no, do it. And I did it and then I quit. I had to do it because I felt an obligation, responsibility that I'd taken this job to do that. but it didn't sit right with me. So I quit. Partly because I never get to where I wanted financially, but partly because I didn't feel they had people's best interest at heart within that system, and they still don't.
And was that the first point you mentioned, back to what we were talking about before the podcast, but that feeling people's pain, that empathy for people and their plight? So is that the first time you might have acknowledged, it's obviously quite a pivotal moment, the first time you might have thought, actually, that's probably when I first started to notice I had that innate ability to understand people's pain?
Probably, but as much as society might think like Turks or Kurds or people from the Middle East are quite tough, the men are very emotional, very in touch with their emotions, very emotionally intelligent. More so, I'd say, than in England. And a big statement, I know, but they show all the emotions more extremely. Let's say that's probably the fairest way of saying it. So when they get angry, they get flipping angry. When they get sad, they get very sad. So I'm not adverse to seeing my uncles crying, my dad crying of like stuff, whether it's tough, whether it's whatever. So
it's more demonstrative, arguably more demonstrative. I know I'm speaking in broad sweeping stereotypes, but that's certainly been my experience as a general theme. It's a more demonstrative society.
Yeah. I hear you. No, it makes sense. So I think I've been used to that early on, and seeing mum and dad suffer and struggle, and probably myself. Yeah, I don't know whether we spoke about it, I don't know whether it's nurture or nature or whether I was born with it, but I'm quite emotionally, a very emotional guy, and I feel like I feel pain, other people's pain. So when I speak to someone and they're talking to me about something that's happened, I can't help but well up, or I can't help but, because it's not that what they're saying is sad, is that I can see in their eyes they're feeling it. Yeah. It's an immense amount of pain, which I don't know how to describe it, but I get the same feeling inside, and I sort of think, so I want to help. I want to stop pain and suffering.
It kind of then, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but how does it manifest? How does it play out for you? Do you because I think that you can't fix everything, right?
That's what my therapist says.
Nor everyone. So how do you cope with that?
A lot better now that I understand it. I didn't understand it when I was younger. And early on, just to go back to your previous question, when I used to fight with my cousins and we'd wrestle, sometimes if I got really angry, I cried. And I remember you saying that you're a bit like that. It's like when I got so angry at something because I couldn't beat them or something, I would cry. And I was thinking, what the hell's going on here? It's not normal behavior. Surely I should be smashing shit up and running out the room and screaming and shouting, as you see on television. The manifest position is like, I want to help. I can't turn my back on people. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing and a curse because I'm very fortunate. I have very, very good people around me that are of a similar mindset. But a randomer can ask me something and I just can't pretend I've not seen it. It's really, really difficult. Like if someone inboxes me on Instagram and it goes my message request, I have a million friends that will pretend they've not read that. But I click on it and it's something about losing a daughter or I do put it back down. I'll go about my day and it'll get to like 9 p.m. and I'm sat on the sofa at home. I'll be like, it's in my head. I'm like, I can't let that go. I'm going to have to reply and do what I can so I know I can sleep at night. Like that could be my dad asking for help. That could be me asking for help. It could be my kids one day. Do you know what I mean? But it means that I can't finish my own shit half the time because I'm too busy trying to fix these problems that aren't necessarily my problems. And we've been through this I went to see a therapist for a while to deal with some loads of shit. And she was like, Tyler, there's two things I'm going to say to you. One, you don't need to fit in anymore. Like you're an adult. You've proved everyone wrong. You're okay. Stop. And secondly, you're not a superhero and you can't fix everything. You can't fix the world. I'm like, yeah, but I can. She's like, you can't. I'm like, oh. So it's a battle. I'm developing myself in that area. So I'm learning how to not, without sounding horrible, not be as attached to another person's problems.
I think it's interesting that I'm intrigued. I'm kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. But as I'm right in understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but you opened your first nightclub at 24?
24, yeah.
So I think to go into the entertainment industry, that strikes me as there's an element of people pleasing with that.
Yep.
And if I might just qualify that without making accusations at you, but like the way it strikes me is that's about giving people a good time, creating experiences for people and things that they can remember and they enjoy. I look back at my teens and my 20s and some of my best memories with my friends are in clubs.
Mm-hmm. Likewise.
I grew up kind of with an acid house generation, and then into the early night and the dance music scene. And even
Great
now,
generation, that.
great generation to be around. And I even now, I mean, we'll come onto your podcast, but I've got a Brandon Block story, and it's Cafe Mambo in Ibiza. So, but some of those best memories are created. I was away 2 weeks ago with a group of my oldest friends, and we're still talking about stuff, places we went to, experiences we had in the 90s. So you're creating experiences, making memories. Is that what drove? It's a bit of a leading question, never a good premise, but nonetheless, is that what drove you into that world, into that industry?
At the time, no, because I'm young and I don't understand what I'm doing truly. But if I look back now, yes, because ultimately at college, I started to be a promoter, giving out flyers. Now, if I look back from the head on my shoulders now, thinking why I did that, it was to have an excuse to talk to people without looking like a weirdo, an excuse to chat to women, an excuse to fit in. And the fitting in thing comes back. Then I started putting on my own parties and nights. Why? Because I wanted Ty to be that man, that he wasn't. Ty's the man, Ty's the kiddie. I wasn't that kid at school, but I was yearning to be that kid at school.
It's back to the throwing a stone through a window or being the nerd,
so
or whatever
if I can be like the big name in town, build your name up, build a promoter, then I'll fit in. Everyone will accept me. Then they'll see past that maybe I was a little immigrant and that I'm actually one of them. It's so deeply rooted. But I've only really discovered this in the last 5 years through speaking to someone about it. I always just presumed it was because I saw a niche in a market and thought I can do this. I'm very, very good at networking naturally. It wasn't called networking then. I'm very, very good at bringing people together and getting them to trust me and open up and enjoy themselves. But if I was being really honest with myself, it probably was an element of wanting to be the kiddie about town.
That's fair.
That's kind of how it started.
It's very honest of you.
Yeah, that's kind of probably how it started. So I met a guy who was trying to tap into the college market. I was at college and he said, look, can you give out flyers for these parties for me? I was like, do you know what? I need to make some friends. Yeah, let's do it. I'm now at Bournemouth College and I live in Swanage. So I'm an unknown again. I'm starting again. But it's a lot more mixed. Times have changed, all this kind of stuff. So I started giving out flyers basically. But yeah, I'd say all of that definitely roots back to those childhood kind of challenges.
So how do you open a nightclub, right? So this is from a position of naivety. From my perspective, I'm looking at how do you even get to run a nightclub? How do you persuade someone at 24 as to the virtues of allowing you to facilitate that, whether that's investment, whatever it is, whatever capital, whatever you need? How do you go about opening a nightclub?
I mean, the story is really long, but again, I started as a promoter giving out flyers. Then I started doing my own nights. So I'd go to a nightclub that was either shut on a certain night or wasn't very busy on a certain night. And I'd say it's your nightclub. I'd say, Lee, look, you're doing rubbish on a Friday. Give me the Friday. I'll take all the door money. You take all the bar money. I'll pay for the DJ and I'll bring the people. Like you might only be taking 500 quid now on a Friday, but I'm going to make sure you're going to take more than $5,000, but I want to take all your door money. You're like, nothing to lose. It's a shit night anyway. Go on then. So then you go out, you give out the flyers, you do all this kind of shit and you fill the club. Then it becomes a bit of a hotspot. In those days, you didn't have to book big DJs. You just had a resident from local and it was more about who was there. In these days, to drag people out now, you've got to spend tons of money on entertainment. It's a nightmare. The industry changed. So I started doing that and people turn their nose up a little bit at that. And what I mean by that is as an income, they're like, oh, you're a promoter. But let me give you some real easy maths. So if pretend the club's got 1,000 capacity and I'm charging £5 to get in, that's $5,000. It's costing me 250 quid for a DJ and 250 quid on promotion. It's $4,500 cash in those days. Now imagine doing that 3 times a week in 5 different towns. It's Premiership footballer money and in cash. But you're a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid. You've had no financial, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book. You've had no financial education from your father because he's had none. You've not been to university and they teach you fuck all at school about actual life.
Yeah.
Now what do? Most people, when they make their first 300 quid, go and buy a Louis Vuitton belt. Do you see what I mean? Or something like that to floss. I didn't because I was like, I never want to be back in that position eating cold meat or being there and I'm still chasing this kind of happiness. So I thought, right, shoebox. Then how do I invest it wisely? What do I do? And I started doing some little side hustles, importing tablets. When the iPad first came out, I was importing tablets with a friend of mine from China and selling them on eBay. They were an Android tablet and we were getting them in at $69 delivered, and we were selling for $199.99 or $119.99, sorry, on eBay. Leading up to Christmas, 6 weeks, did tons of that. All this kind of stuff. And then it's all about, there's an element of luck, but I don't believe in luck as such. I feel the harder I work, the luckier I get, you know, that old quote. But it's an element of creating opportunities or identifying opportunities when they're there and not being afraid to take them. So if an opportunity came up and someone said, "Oh, Ty, we want to put on a big event at the O2. Do you fancy coming in on it?" I'd be like, yes. I said yes to everything, mate. Literally everything that come my way. And 9 out of 10 of them lost, and one of them did all right. But I just said yes, because I thought, what have I got to lose? If I go back to where I started, that's cool. I've been there. I know what that feels like. I'm not starting here. I'm starting here. So there's only one way, really. And if I go back, I just reset and start again like a computer game.
Do you think by saying yes to everything with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, you were kind of sense checking, and you're gaining experiences, right? So you're working out for yourself through those experiences what works, what doesn't, where you're good, where you're not, where your strengths are, where you're perhaps not so strong that you can improve.
Nothing substitutes experience.
Yeah.
Nothing. So again, I was gaining experience, but what it also did, which is really good, when you're the guy that takes on everything, guess what comes more your way? More opportunities.
Yeah.
Because people are like, fuck, I need to do this thing. I know, there's that guy, Ty, he seems to do everything. Everything he does seems to work. He's got the Midas touch. We'll go and see him. And that's kind of what happened. Then you start getting a bit of opportunities. People are like, should we do this? Should we do that? Should we do it? So I'd effectively done all the promotional stuff, started building a pot of money. Then I thought, right, I need to kind of learn how to run a club now. And there was a club in town next to Camel. You might know Camel in Bournemouth.
Yes.
You know Camel? Next to it called, at the time it was called 176. And a friend of mine was running it, Mike. And he asked me to effectively come and manage it. And it was a really small club. It was opened at midnight, shut at 6 a.m. It's a graveyard shift, mate. All the worst type of people, dregs of society would come in at like 3 a.m. from other clubs, just fucked. And they're there and you're trying to deal with them. But that taught me ordering, rota, stock, all the procedures and stuff you'd need to learn operationally. Because I was already into marketing. I naturally did that, selling.
And also to your point as well around dealing with people, oftentimes, many of the vast majority, I'm sure, of whom are having a great time, right? Decent people. But you're going to get the odd wrong in any scenario. You also learn a lot, I would imagine, about how to deal with those sorts of scenarios.
You get more wrong-uns in those clubs because they're open later.
Right.
So if you think about yourself when you go out, pre-midnight, you're a nice bloke. After midnight, you start to turn because you're probably a bit too intoxicated. But to stay out till 6, you might be on a substance.
Yeah.
Then you're not you. And that's just the way the world goes. So you are dealing with all that shit. Anyway, that came about, and then a few other opportunities come about. It's like a few stepping stones. And then this big club, I was doing nights at all the clubs in town at this point. I was actually doing nights at V, which is now Halo. So I was a promoter for them, doing a night. I'd done a night with Skepta. I'd done a night with Mark Wright on New Year's Eve. I'd done all these. I used to bring these PAs down and do them. Did some at Chili White Bliss. So I was working there, doing that, doing my thing. I had no intention of really owning a nightclub, if I'm completely honest. I just thought this promotional thing's pretty cool. Like, I'm earning good money from it, and I really enjoy it, which is the main thing.
What did you enjoy about it?
I just enjoy. This is why I do events. I enjoy having an idea and watching that idea materialize. I really get a buzz off that. So me and you sit around here and go, let's put a festival on the beach. And you'd be like, nah, you can't do that. Yeah, we can do it. Why not? Fuck it, let's do it. And in 6 months' time, stood on that stage, looking out at 5,000 people looking at you, having an unbelievable time, and you facilitating that. That feeling for me is an amazing drug. That, like, what your idea is giving people pleasure, joy, happiness, smiles, dancing, laughter. That I feel like fulfills anything that more than money can fulfill, the actual money side. And what we did with our club nights and everything we tried to do is we concentrate still to this day. Like when every Monday we have a managers meeting at Halo, the first thing we will ask is, how was the weekend? And obviously the managers will naturally go through figures. And I'm like, oh yeah, a bit shit financially. And I was like, how was the party though? What was the vibe like? Vibe was amazing. Perfect. They're going to come back. That's fine. We can build on that.
Yeah.
If the vibe's shit and the money's good, we're fucked because it's not going to last.
Yeah.
You're going to have to keep finding new customers, which is fucking hard, as you know.
Yeah.
It's easier to have like people returning if you can get that.
Was there a pivotal moment, if you like, that you would attribute to your success as a promoter, and then some, or indeed in terms of the nightclub space?
I think one thing we did very well is two things. One was we tapped into multicultural. So when I was doing my club nights, people were still segmented. People weren't as mixed. But I'm a bit of a chameleon. So I could go and see the rich white kids and go, we've got this party going on. I could then go and see the foreigners and go, we've got this party going on. I could go and see the takeaway people. I could go and see the local drug dealers. I could go and see and go, look, we've got this party going on, come. And they all had an element of trust because they could link to me in one way or another. My story matched their story one way or another, whether I went to the same school as those lads or whether I had the same story of how I got to England with those lads. So it kind of, that was very good. And I was extremely ballsy. So if everyone was running that way, I ran that way. You know, I think Warren Buffett says it about trading. When everyone's pulling out, you put in. When everyone's putting in, you pull out. You know, like don't follow the herd. So I think we were one of the first in town to bring a PA down. So you remember like the Z-listers, The Only Way is Essex, all these. So we brought Mario to Bournemouth. He was one of the Italian stallion from the thing. We brought him to Chili Whites. And it was a Friday night, and their Fridays are notoriously shit. And I was like, look, the God rest his soul, the manager now isn't around anymore, but Paul, I said to him, look, mate, let us take your Friday night on. He was like, Tyler, it's a big room club. You've not done a club this big room before. It's like 1,500 cap or whatever. I was like, look, I'm confident I can do it. Just give me one shot. If it doesn't work, it won't work. I'm going to book this. He was like, all right, we'll give you a shot. It took a few months. He gives us a shot. Anyway, we've booked this guy. We've got him to tweet. That was Twitter then. Instagram wasn't around. We've got him to tweet. I'm coming down to, Ty's night, whatever. And we've given out loads of flyers. We're postering stuff ourselves. We're smashing Twitter, Facebook. Again, there's no Instagram. And the thing with a promoter is you always have this moment of severe anxiety when the doors open. The doors open at 10 p.m. and at 1 to 10, you're shitting yourself. You might have sold 100 tickets or you might have not. That's irrelevant. Is anyone going to turn up? Am I going to be stood here on my own, scratching my head, and my ego and my pride is going to hurt because nobody came to my party? And that's happened quite a few times in the early days. Like 5 people turn up and 2 of them are your cousins and one's like their girlfriend, if you know what I mean. Anyway, we've opened it up and we're stood across the road. And this is a period when I was trying to get into V to be a promoter there, and they wouldn't let me in because they were saying it's too big club for me. So I stood across the road with a couple of the people that I was kind of doing the night with, and we're like waiting. It's 10 o'clock, like nothing. 10:15, a few people comes. 10:30, a few people comes. Like 11:15, there's 1,000 people queuing around the corner, round to Bliss, round to the pub on the thing, and we're sitting here. And then the high-level manager and owner of V drove past, and we're like, what the fuck's going on there? Why have we got no one there? They're full, sort of thing. So it was like quite a good little war. But that's a pinnacle moment as well, because that's when I thought, I can do this. Like, I can bring the masses out. It's all good putting 100 people in a bar, but I can bring the masses out. I can promote, if you know what I mean. I just now, like, I'm a bit of a nutter in that sense. If I genuinely believe in something in my head, I'll double down on it. I'll put everything on it because I know whether I win or lose, it was the right decision at that time, and I can live with that.
Do you think the evolution to events, is that, again, perhaps arguably a naive perspective, but is there that sense of, putting on a club night as a promoter to then subsequently understanding what it takes to run a club, manage a club, to then own one, but then start to look at events, to your point around whether is it very similar, or what if there are, what are the differences?
It is similar. It's ultimately the way you look at a nightclub. So there's 2 elements to this. One is, remember I said my attention span is a bit shit?
Yeah.
So I'm surprised I'm still in the room with you. So one of it is that I struggle with I'm a very good leader. I'm a terrible manager because I struggle with the day-to-day mundane tasks. So the club is great for me, but I'm bored of it very, very quickly. I'm bored of the restaurant very quickly. I'm bored of this very quickly because it's the same every day. But I'm very, very fortunate to have an incredible team. So the team keep that going. I can dip in and out once or twice a week for some meetings and work on the business, not in the business, and work on the vision. That works. That works really well. The reason the events industry is very good for me because it's different every time. Yeah. It's new every time. I love the early days of putting something on. I actually love the sitting around like this, brainstorming, really kind of understanding human behavior and what we can do, the little details. I love the little details. Whatever I try and do, I try and disrupt the market. So if everyone's doing a boxing event like this, I'll do a boxing event, but I'll do it like this. And everyone will be like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm doing it like this. Well, why? Because I want to. Or because you're all doing it like this. You're missing a trick here. Look at this, this, and this. And they're like, yeah, but you're just, so to give you an example, we did charity boxing matches called Vantage Sporting Group. And you'd raise money for Dorset Mind, and it's for people unlicensed. So like, say like you, if I don't know if you've not had a boxing fight before, but say it's white collar. So people that have never had a fight, we give them 8 weeks training for free, and we put them against someone similar weight and age and ability, and they get big old gloves, gum shield, head guard, and they swing their arms around for a minute and a half, 3 rounds, and there's a winner and a loser basically, and they get to raise money. And there's tons of boxing shows going on in town, and I love boxing as a sport. I've boxed a lot, not competitively, but as a training method. But every time I went to these boxing shows, I had to put my back against the wall, and I felt it was seedy. I couldn't take my missus. Everyone's a little bit, there's so much testosterone and ego in these rooms. And I was like, fucking hell, like, it's good money to be made here, but it's got to be accessible.
Yeah.
Like, I've got businessmen friends that wouldn't be seen dead here, but they love boxing. What's the difference between them going to Eddie Hearn's show to them coming to a show in Bournemouth? And then I quickly identified, it's like, it's the details, the finer details. So I would have everything branded. I'd have menu branded. I'd have a booklet that showed you every fighter, like the tail, like how long their arm is, their reach is, what their way is, what their record is. Proper, like Matchroom did it. I'd have branding everywhere, and everyone would be like, Ty, I'd have even the canvas had our logo on the ring, and the corner posts and all that stuff. And we'd do really good social media marketing, and we'd do unbelievable looking posters. And everyone's like, you're wasting your money, Ty. You're spending another $5,000. No one's going to notice. I'll say to you, I said, mate, they're going to notice. I tell you what, they're not going to notice the cups branded, but when they walk away from that show, they're going to go, "Oh, that was really good, wasn't it?" They're not going to know what was good about it, because not everyone has an eye for detail, but they're going to get a different feeling from that show than they're going to get from your show.
And to your point, you just something that struck me there was that sense of, I can't remember the specific quote, but that's something about around people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
So you're creating experiences.
We're selling experiences,
feeling, right?
Yeah. An event is an experience. We're selling memories.
Yeah.
Right. That's all we have in life, right? Moments in time, memories. That's all. Everything is that. When you're laying on your deathbed, you're not going to look at anything else but the memories or the people around you, if you're lucky to have anyone around you. Like, so if we're creating these experiences for people, why would we not want it to be the best experience for them? And I always think, like, would I go there? Would I pay that much money? Would I eat that? Would I drink that? Would I let my kid drink that or eat that? Yes. Let's sell it.
It's really interesting, though, that there's an evolution here. Forgive my amateur psychology, but there's an evolution that starts from a desire to fit in, based from feeling on the outside, wanting to fit in, to then getting to a point whereby it's not about fitting in anymore, it's about standing out. It's quite an interesting evolution to your point, where you're now creating events where you kind of go, yeah, well, okay, so we're going to put on a boxing night, but it's going to be different. We're going to put on to your point, we'll come on to festivals, but, Samfest, Sam Polo, the things we do it on the beach. Why wouldn't we do it on the beach? Well, no one else has done it. It's a daft. Why wouldn't we do it on the beach? It's different. So there's this. It strikes me. Is that fair? Do you think that's this sense of you've gone from fitting in to kind of actually now I want to stand out?
It's 100% fair, but I think the reasoning for that is also really interesting. When you discover yourself, everyone's got strengths and weaknesses or things they're better at. You have to play to your strengths in life. And as a kid, because we're not fully developed and we don't really understand and we're not that aware, we try and hide our strengths because we want to be the same as someone else. We want to fit in. So we try and have the same qualities as everyone else. When you get older and you're more aware, which is where I am now, I actually realize the thing that's making me excel, both in business, in friendships, in relationships, and as a human, is the things that people found weird when I was at school, the things that I didn't fit in with when I was at school. So now I empower those, because guess what? No one can be me.
But that understanding and that self-awareness is of itself a difficult journey, right? Because you have to have some knocks to go through that. And you will have had some, I mean, even if we look at the times in which we find ourselves now, you go through COVID. I mean, being in the entertainment industry and having everything shut down for the best part of 2 years. I mean, the knocks that you will have had along the way. And also I think that you're in a world, entertainment's promotion, where I don't know if it's uniquely British, but we love a tall poppy, right? We love to put people on a pedestal and then see how we can shoot them down.
Yeah.
And I think that you've put yourself out there to be shot at. So I'd imagine that whether consciously or otherwise.
I'm acutely aware of that.
Yeah, and so people will have knocked you.
They still do.
Business is business. I think oftentimes there's this perception within business that once you get to it's back to what you earn money, you're happy, you get to the top. Actually, it's never a straight line. It's a series of curves and twists and pitfalls and troughs and all the ups and downs, however you want to describe it. You'll have had a lot of knocks along the way that might, I suspect, have led you to question actually standing out. Should I? Do I? So where do you think? I guess where does the strength come from to actually, you're onto something, you believe in yourself? How have you gotten that belief?
Two things I would say, because someone asked me about this before, like how do you build resilience? One thing is nurture. So one thing is I was extremely, extremely lucky. I have parents that are still together and hold hands and skip, which is flipping unusual in our society nowadays. So one thing was real, unconditional love from mum and dad, like real unconditional love with no other agenda. Me first, always me first. And you can feel that love. I've felt that love. I grew up with that love. I can also give that love because I've felt it. I understand it. I know it. I can also pass it on. Then the second part would be the resilience. So to build any amount of strength and resilience, I think you have to have challenges in life. Yeah. You have to have challenges because you have to understand yourself. You have to understand your mind, your body. You have to understand that you're actually a lot stronger than you think you are. You have to push that chimp away in your brain that's telling you can't do anything. So put it this way. If all the way through school you were the top in the PE class, top into this, top into that, top into this, and you've never had an obstacle to jump over, the first obstacle you come to, you crumble. You absolutely shatter into a million pieces. If you've grown up with challenges, you're so accustomed to that feeling that when that comes round again, it doesn't throw you off. You're like, oh, okay, there you are again. Hello, old friend. We meet again and we go again. I know I can beat you. I've beaten you before. I'm going to beat you again. Like repetition, right? None of us are born in life being good at anything. We don't know fuck all when we're born. We can't even wipe our own arse when we're born. So anything, by definition, that if we're getting good at it is through repetition. So resilience is the same. Strength is the same. You have to keep failing, losing, being knocked back, having challenges to build that strength. Think of like muscles in the gym, really basic example, analogy. To grow your bicep, what do? You lift a weight. What does that do? It breaks the bicep down. Then the brain goes, I need to be stronger to survive. It rebuilds it stronger. And that's effectively what we need to do in our minds. David Goggins says about it, building calluses in your mind. You got to keep doing it, I think. If you look at the SAS Who Dares Wins program, quite a good example. If you look at the people in there that are big, strong and fit, that have always done well from a young age because they're naturally athletic, they're genetically gifted, and they're big, strong and fit, the first time they get put in a position where they're struggling, the armband comes off. You look at the little dude that's been picked on, beaten up, bullied his whole life, has built a mindset where he never gives up. He's as stubborn as a mule. He becomes your selected soldier because he's fine in that discomfort. He's fine out of his comfort zone. He lives in there. He thrives in there. Whereas the other guys are so used to the comfort of their home. And I practice this sometimes. It's quite a stoic mentality. I always I say to my missus, and I do it myself, let's take away now and then some of our comforts and get used to it, bring it back in, reintroduce it and retake it away so that one day if life takes it away, we're not shocked by it. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So sleep on the floor one night, a month. Walk around with no shoes on 1 week. All this does is build you. So for one day, God forbid, something happens in life and you end up living on the street, sleeping on the floor, it's not as big as a shock to you because you've been living in a mansion in a king bed with a maid and a servant and a driver. So you just have to stay grounded, I feel. Do
you think that's back to what that message that your dad gave you at 16, whereby he's saying, so heaven forbid, but if something happens to me and your mum, how are you going to survive?
Yeah, 100%. Every time I sort of feel like giving up, and there's been a lot of times, especially through COVID, I always go back to that moment. I sort of think, oh, fuck, I can't do this anymore. I'm overwhelmed. Everything's too much. I might not say this out loud, but I'm thinking it. I sort of think, all right, Ty, think about this. I try and put things into perspective. Think about what your parents did, what they gave up for you. They had hopes and dreams. They're humans. They might have wanted to pursue careers. They gave everything up. They moved to a foreign land, couldn't speak the language, had no money for you to have a better life. You're going to give up like this, here, sat in your 100-grand Mercedes, wearing your 50-grand watch. What's wrong? There's a pothole that your wheel hit. It's a problem, is it? Do you see what I mean? So it's perspective. Like if I ever need it, I drive to Swanage and have an hour with my dad. Genuinely. If I'm ever feeling like, right, I'm getting a bit big for my boots here, like I'm being those people that I didn't like, that maybe talked to me in a certain way as I was coming through, you know, and me and my missus had these realization moments where like, oh, the so-and-so sing. And I'm like, babe, like, well, look what we're talking about. Like, I don't know, there's a pothole and you've curved your wheel. Like, really? So I go and sit with my dad. I'm like, Dad, I've got loads of stress. He's like, what's wrong, son? I'm like, this, and this. And he's like, son, what will be, will be. Like, he's got this calm, stoic kind of profound way of looking at everything. And I'm trying to adopt that from him. And I only recently discovered like stoic mindset and mentality and all this stuff very recently, like probably within the last 3 years. But I've just clicked with it because actually that's what my dad's been installing in me for forever. Control the controllables, you know, like all this kind of stuff that those guys meditate by, Marcus Aurelius and all these. So he's been teaching me that. But him not knowing it's called stoic, he doesn't know who Marcus Aurelius is. He doesn't know anything about that. He's never been to school. He naturally does it through his environment he's grown up in. He's installed that in me. And I just could never fit in with any literature I'd read, anything I'd seen, till I discovered this Stoics. And I was like, fuck, this is it.
This stuff's been around for thousands of years.
Forever.
Right? Yeah.
And it's as relevant now as it was relevant then.
I think arguably why it's been around for thousands of years, because the stuff works, right? It's true.
It's perfect. And I read, you know, I've got the Daily Stoic book and the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. One's by Ryan Holiday, one's by Robert Greene. Two authors that I really like. And every morning, I read it this morning, there's one page in each book and it's dated. And you read the book over and over every year. And all it does is it just, you know, it sets you up. You open up, you read a passage from Marcus Aurelius's translated diary, and then you read Ryan Holiday's kind of interpretation of that into modern life. And every day I think, yeah, I got this today. Like it's just like a little bit of and that's like part of my morning routine. I did it this morning before I come here.
Is there, you run multiple businesses now.
Yeah.
Is there a typical day for you? And if so, what does that look like?
Typical day, what I would like is different to typical day that I might have. So typical day that I would like to do is I would like to train at least once a day. I would like to see friends. I would like to have good coffee. I'd like to do some form of education, some form of physical challenge, some form of mental challenge. But generally speaking, my days would be like, I'll be up at 6 most days. I try and get a minimum of 6 hours. I'm working on that. I've got this Whoop band and it's telling me I need to sleep more. So I'm trying to go to bed a little bit earlier. Up at 6, I'll do my morning routine of read my 2 books, do my journal writing, meditation, whatever I'm going to do. I'll then go down and train. I'll either run along the beach or I'll go to jiu-jitsu. I'll then get into work, have breakfast, do some emails, have a few meetings, do some more work, train again in the afternoon, come home, do a little bit more work, and then have dinner and try and spend a couple of hours with my wife. It's actually very boring. It's not as exciting as you think. I need routine in my life. The reason I need routine is to find balance. I feel you need routine because otherwise I feel like I'm floating in the abyss. My food goes out the window. My diet goes out the window. You know, my sleep goes out the window. And then my function, focus, brain, physically, mentally, it all goes out the window. Everything becomes a problem.
But that routine, I think, is an essential component for so many of us. You know, actually, I want to come on to mind, if you like, and mental health. So you're an ambassador for Dorset Mind.
That's right.
What's the story behind it? What led you there and why did you do it?
When I was 12, maybe 13, 14, one of our family relatives who we like effectively call like a cousin, he's not blood related, but that's in Turkey you have these things. He took his own life in London. And I was very young, like I think he was 2 years above me. I might have been 12, he might have been 14.
Goodness.
Or I might have been 13, he might have been 15, something like that. Anyway, it was back in 2008 or something, and February 2008. And I couldn't understand it. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand anything. And no one was talking about mental health. No one was talking about this kind of things that go through your head, your depression, your bipolar, your this, that, really. No one around me anyway. It might have been, but I don't feel like it was as open. So that happened. And then I obviously had a little bit of bullying at school. I went through some things myself. I partied a lot when I was a bit younger. That was a bit up and down. I dabbed around with steroids when I was a bit younger. That kind of threw me in a weird mental space. And then like every year, 1 or 2 friends I was losing. And I was sort of thinking, what the fuck is going on? Like why? I couldn't understand because life was so struggle ridden early on, both listening to my parents growing up and maybe very early on for me, why this beautiful blessing we have that anyone wouldn't want to be here. I couldn't fathom it. Anyway, times went on and I got into promoting. I got into the nightclub industry. I got into the boxing industry. And one thing I discovered is that the industries I'm involved in notoriously don't talk about their feelings. Everyone's trying to be a plastic gangster. Everyone's trying to be a big, hard man. And there's a lot of pressure on men to provide, to look, stiff upper lip we spoke about earlier, all these sort of things in society against men. Women are allowed to cry. Kids are allowed to cry. Why aren't men allowed? They're allowed now, but why was it weak if you saw them
I even look
crying?
I read something, I can't remember, and the fact that now I'm going to butcher this quote or this experience is not great, but it just sticks in my mind. I remember an example that was given. So I've got a son and a daughter. And I remember when they were little, toddlers, my daughter would fall over and bump her knee or whatever. I'd pick her up and I'd give her a big hug. She'd cry, give her a big hug, and I'd pat her on the back and I'd say, there. And my son, and I'm ashamed to admit this now, but I think it's the benefit, but my son would do the same, and I'd be like, don't cry. Come on, pull yourself together.
You're a tough boy, you're all right, you've got this.
And I was hardwired to think that way. Now that's no disrespect to my parents. I had a wonderful upbringing. I'm a very lucky man. I think you talk about that unconditional love from your parents. It's something that I greatly benefit from too. Yeah. But I think it was an really interesting, just through no malice or intent or education, I was just wired to think, there, pat my daughter on the back, let her cry out with my son, pick him up, dust him down, be tough, come on son, man up. It's an awful expression.
I think as parents, and it's very easy for me to say, I'm not a parent yet, and I can't wait to be. It's one of my all-time goals to be a dad. I think one of our biggest goals and responsibilities as a parent is to identify the demons that will pass down to you and not pass them down to your kids. It's extremely important because we're all subliminally programmed a certain way. You were programmed by your parents to do that with your son and daughter. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all you know. It goes back to that thing about the kids bullying me. That's all you knew. But as you get older, I'm 34, I'm very, very aware now of the things that my mum and dad did when I was young that affected me adversely and the things that affected me positively. And I'm going to try my hardest to be able to pass on the right things and not the things that I feel is going to make their life harder. And through Dorset Mind and some of the training I've done, I now understand that between the ages 2 and 7 is when we absorb the most, which is fucking mind-blowing. How many times have you spoken or acted away around a 2-3-year-old thinking they won't know they're a kid? So, there's all these studies, if you're coming home and without triggering anyone, your dad's beating your mum up, who's an alcoholic, or your mum's doing this, you might not get affected by that there and then or not feel you are. But there might be a time when you're 35, your wife acts the same way your mum did to your dad, and your arm might go up without you realizing to hit them. And you can't work out why. You've never been a violent person. You've never hit anyone. But guess what? That hard wiring that you thought wasn't subliminally programmed into you, it is programmed into you. And your instinct is to do what you saw when you were 2 years old or 5 years old or 7 years old. So it's extremely important. Are we leading by example? And my dad always tries to champion this, and he couldn't always do it. He had massive stresses if you speak to him, what he went through to come here. So there's things he accidentally would have passed on. There's that quote, you might have seen it on TikTok, it's going around. And I'm saying men because the quote says men. This isn't men, this could be women, this is people. So I don't want to isolate anyone. But it says, tough times, you might have heard it. It says, tough times create strong men create good times create weak men create tough times. And it's a never-ending cycle. And I was chatting to Dee from Dorset Mind about this when we have our morning walks. So my dad is a tough man from a tough time, right? So he's created a good time for me. So I've lived 5,000% more comfortable than he has. I'm not getting blown up walking to school. I'm not getting eaten by wolves walking to school. I'm not seeing a dead body on the floor. I'm not doing none of that shit. I'm in England, safest country in the world. And my kids, I'm married to an English woman, and our kids are going to grow up even more privileged than I grew up. But guess what? Their kids, so there's that thing my dad walked to school. I got a bus. My son drives a Mercedes. His son's going to drive a Ferrari, but his son's going to walk again because they're going to fuck it up at some point. It's a cycle. You can't help it because it's too easy. There's no value of anything. It comes and goes. You wake up every day, it's Christmas. What's the point of waking up anymore? That's kind of what I'm trying my hardest to not, and I do it with myself and I do it with my wife and I try and do it with my friends. I like make ourselves check in on ourselves. Hang on a minute. We're talking a bit snobby here. We're not about that life. Like we're normal people. We're good people. Yeah. That's not the right thing to feel. You know, if your son comes home and moans about his friends or whatever, you want to just jump in and gossip. But, you know, I might, you know, if my missus comes home and goes, so-and-so said this, or if I come home and go, so-and-so said this, we're very good at helping each other. And we'd be like, well, babe, you don't know what they've been through today. You know, they might have woke up and found out this. You know, you get in an Uber. I was chatting to an Uber driver in London on Saturday, and he was saying, he goes to me, where do you live, sir? When I got in, and I said, he goes, do you live in London? I said, no, Bournemouth. He goes, I can tell. He said, why? I said, because he said to me, I've got 5-star rating from drivers and I've given all 5 stars. He said, in London, you don't get that because everyone's very angry. And we had this really deep, weird, profound chat with this Uber driver for about 3 minutes while we were driving. And I said to him that I don't hold anything against anyone because I feel that that's a cry for help for them, never at me. I never take it personally. So when I get in that Uber car, what people do, this is my perception of it, is if the Uber driver's talking to them all the way along and being really nice and being friendly, they give a 5-star. If the Uber driver is very polite, has manners, but doesn't speak, they might give a 3-star. But how can you judge that guy on that? How do you know what's going through? He hasn't been rude. He's been polite. He's got you there safely. He's done all of his responsibilities as an Uber driver. What, because he didn't chat shit to you and gossip about the Kardashians or someone else for 3 minutes that he doesn't get a star? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll just try and champion that. And I think when I become a parent, or if I'm blessed to become a parent one day, I want to try and pass that forward, pay it forward. I've been lucky to have this knowledge. I just want to pay it forward. And that's kind of probably where the Dorset Mind thing comes from. Like the pinnacle for me was a local guy called Johnny Whittam. He was one of our boxing coaches at Fit to Box when we were doing these charity boxing events. At the time, we were doing them for Julia's House. And he was 31 and he took his own life. And none of us, again, we were like, what the hell? Like, this guy was incredibly infectious, mate. His energy was unbelievable. He was like life and soul of the party. We were thinking like, what's good? But it transpired that he had undiagnosed bipolar disorder or multiple personality disorder, whatever it's called. So he was having massive highs and lows and whatever. So at that point, we then turned to Dorset Mind. We were like, right, in my head, I was thinking, right, that's one too many now.
Yeah.
I've got to make a change. I've got to do something. I'm in an industry that nobody talks about their feelings. Everyone's trying to be a big tough man, big gangster, big this, big that. Load of fucking rubbish. Do you know what I mean? So I thought the best way that I've learned growing up to be able to make change is to lead from the front. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to start talking about my feelings more as a person in a position of power. And in those days when I started doing that, a bit more mysterious, owned a nightclub, young guy, you know, bit of this and that. Not as open and how I am now. Very, very different. Very, very different lifestyle. So I started talking openly about how I feel. Now, people thought I was having a mental breakdown at first. Even in like meetings, rather than going moaning about figures, I'd ask how someone was and how that made them feel and how I felt about that. You know, we do this thing in workplaces where you'll probably agree with this. We want our team to be creative and innovative and proactive, but then we punish them if they are, and it doesn't quite go to plan.
Yeah.
It's the most backwards thing in the world. So what does everyone do? They stay in their box because they're afraid to step out the box, because if that business loses money that week, they're in trouble. We try to then flip that on its head. We were like, look, guys, do what you think is going to work, providing you've done your research and you have a genuine, valid reason why you think it's going to work. If it doesn't work, we're all in it together. We're not going to go, why did you do this, Lee? We're going to go, guys, we've given it a go. That's the best we could have done. We know it's the best we could have done. Let's move on. Don't worry about that problem.
And that's how we learn, right?
That's
how we learn and grow.
Yes. How can we develop if we're not allowed to make mistakes or try new things that don't go to plan? They're not mistakes, you know. Anyway, I started leading from the front. We did a load of fundraising, loads of stuff, loads of fitness-based bits and trying to like raise money and raise awareness for mental health. And this was like 6-7 years ago now. And I feel like, well, there's a long way to go. I feel like we're making a little change in the area, which I'm proud and happy of, if you know what I mean. Absolutely. A small change, even if it's just a couple of more people talking, even if it's.
But if you get one, I think if you get one, Ty, you're making an invaluable contribution. I mean, I think it's interesting that I think that for years we've always understood, right? So if I want to be fit, I have to move my body. Yeah. I have to exercise my body to look after my health. I have to look after my body. But I don't think for the longest time we've ever really truly reflected on how much we need to look after our mind and the impact and the power that the mind has on well-being and and our success. However, that means different things to different people. But the mind is the most powerful, and it's the greatest tool we have. And yet, it's probably, arguably, I would suggest, in the grander sense, the least understood.
Yeah, and it's something we don't feel we need to train, which I think is bizarre.
Yeah.
So you're training your body. Why are you not training your mind? You're developing your body. Why are you not developing your mind? People talk about, I need to sort my diet out. And your diet is, I think Steve Bartlett said this or someone, but I have read it somewhere. Your diet isn't just what you eat or what you drink. It's everything.
It's what you consume,
hang around
isn't it?
Yeah, it's what you consume, everything from technology to social media to the people you're with. Yeah. I can throw all these quotes around. You're a product of your environment. You're average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And these things sound cliche and they're like, bore off tie, but they're fucking true.
They are true.
They're true.
They are true.
I've tried both. I've hung around with those people and I've hung around with those people, and the person that comes out is completely different. So if you're not providing a positive vibe, I'm going to keep you at arm's length.
So who or what inspires you?
Big question, that. Who is a tough one? There isn't anyone really that I look at that would inspire me in terms of like someone that's known. My parents are my ultimate inspiration because of what they've been through and what they've given me. And what inspires me is, without sounding really cliche, I guess I just want to be able to leave the planet a little bit better than I found it. That's probably the bottom line. I don't know how or what that means and how I'm going to get there, or in what terms I'm going to make any change, if any. But in my head, that's probably what keeps me going right now. Like pre-pandemic, I might have wanted 5 houses, 2 private jets, 5 Ferraris, that kind of shit. But like now, I'm 34. I want to get to a point where when I get to about 40, maybe another 6 years, I've given myself that I can get comfortable passive income, and I can probably set up some sort of foundation and just spend my time helping others globally. Obviously, I launched a podcast recently. I'd like to grow that to public speaking and write books. I've already started writing. I've been writing for about 4 years. Just passages that come into my mind from when I was a kid, or just things like my thoughts on a situation that's happened and bits and bobs. And I'll try and put that together to try and, I don't know, help someone down the road. That's kind of where my head's at.
So what does success mean to you?
Success. This is from my dad again, but I'll translate it. I think success is being able to affect those around you positively. That's what I believe it is. We talk about having freedom and having this and having that, but I think that one I said trumps all of that.
So if you were to look back, what advice would you give 18-year-old Ty Temel?
What advice would I give 18-year-old Ty Temel? I would probably tell him that everything's going to be okay, to believe in myself and to enjoy the ride, not to worry too much. Because I think when I look back, I wasn't present a lot of the time because I was worried about the past, worried about the future, having anxiety, I'm still working on this now. I put on an event and I don't see the event till the after movie comes through. And I'm like, okay, now we did a good thing here, because you're sort of like so caught up in it. But that 18-year-old was so worried about the future. Didn't have any GCSEs, he's whole school, GCSEs, this, that, the other. If I look back now, I'd just tell him, mate, just enjoy the ride. Like, everything's going to be sweet. Go with your gut instinct, basically.
So what excites you about the future?
Future, I want to be a parent. That excites me probably the most. I mean, I've always felt I've been ready, but I'm kind of at a point where I think now my mindset of what I want financially has changed. I'm comfortable. I'm okay. Like, I don't need to chase. I've been on that hamster wheel for years. I've sort of half accepted that I don't need to fit in anymore. I am who I am. I'm comfortable in my skin for the first time in a long time. So I think it's probably like a safe time foundation to then go, right, let's pass it on. Let's pay it forward. Being a parent is probably what I'm looking forward to the most in my personal life. Commercially, again, probably what I said earlier, like get to a passive income place, start a foundation, start helping others more so than I am now, but more on a full-time basis with a team, and write, listen, read, travel, just be a good human being, really.
Live life, right?
Yeah, live. I think our ultimate vocation, and Marcus Aurelius said this, is to be a good human being on this planet. That's it. That's the bottom line of my whole ethos. That's my main value. So anytime I'm making a decision that's a little bit difficult, is this the right thing to do? Is this me being a good human or a bad human? Forget all the other politics and man-made or person-made stereotypes and etc.
So where can people go to find out more? All the things that you're involved in, how could they find out more about? Where can they find the podcast? What's the podcast? Let's talk about that first and foremost. Let's give some air to that.
Is called Off Script. It's basically, I've been pretty fortunate over the years to have a phone book of people that have added massive value to my life, like mentors, whoever they might be. And I'm trying to now call these people in, have chats with them and share their story. Because I think there's so much, every human has a different upbringing, every human has a different story. And human stories are the most powerful thing because they're lived. They're not fiction. They're real. They're what they've been through. And I think the more we share that, the more value that people can take away from it. I take away huge value from people. You know, I speak to you for 5 minutes. As we said earlier, every day is a school day. And I went to a talk with Jordan Belford about 6 years ago, the Real Wolf of Wall Street in London, like a seminar. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, there's two positions in life. You're either growing or you're dying. And he said, in the moment you believe you know everything, that's when you start to die. And I was like, whoa, that was heavy. Because, you know, you get to a certain point and you start sticking your nose up. You know, like, think of me, like I'm an old promoter now. I'm 34. I'm the nightclub owner. And we've got 18, 19-year-old promoters coming through. And they're telling us that we should be doing this, this, and this. And my ego is going, who the hell are you to tell me that? Like, where am I sat? But in reality, times are changing. Like, we have to keep up with it. You know, it's not the strongest of species that survive, as you know. It's the one most adaptable to change. So if times are changing, can we change?
It's the one true constant, right? It's the one thing we can guarantee, that constant change.
Us as a business. So you kind of got to throw that ego to one side and be like, you know what? These are the kids of the future. They know better what our market wants than I want. I'm an old man now. Our market at Halo is 18 to 25. Really, I like core market. We say 18 to 35, but 18 to 25 is our core market. I'm 34. I'm 10 years. I'm a decade late.
I was saying to my folks, goodness me, only a couple of weeks ago, that the thing I love about my two now, who are nearly not, son's 19 next week, as I mentioned, my daughter will be 21 next year.
That's mad,
I learn more from them. I've got to that point where I learn more from them than I think I can teach them. Now, I'm not sure that that's not necessary. It's not mean that I shouldn't continue to guide and support and help as I would do naturally as a father. But I learn more from them than I think that they would learn from me at this stage in their life. I find that's really exciting to me.
My dad's the same with me. And if you think about the developments, like when I think of my dad's dad and my dad, the technological developments, then I think of from you to your kids, right? And look how much has changed.
That's crazy. You know, I can tell you.
And you're quite a modern dad by the looks of it. Like, I've obviously just discovered how old you are, which I'm shocked. He's a lot older than he looks, by the way.
Well, I think, you know, you're absolutely right. I come from a school, you know, my first proper job, I didn't have a PC on my desk.
No.
I had a Rolodex and a phone. Right, so that's and that in the grand scheme, it doesn't feel to me like it's that long ago. The reality is it is. But, you know, I remember the first business I owned, we put an IT system in, and my business partner, who was the senior partner in the business and a fabulous guy, but he never worked with computers. And I remember we had mouse to the computer. He didn't know how to use it. He picked it up and was waving it around in the air because he wanted to understand. Because no one had ever showed him. He'd never seen one. That in the grand scheme of things is not that long ago. No, and so I think to your point around technological advances, I mean, that's hugely exciting. You know, if you look at the podcast platform, yes, okay, they've been around in reality, where did Joe Rogan first start? In the noughties, didn't he? 2008, something like that. Yeah. I don't know those specifics. But so as a medium, as a platform, it's been around. But it's only really in the last few years it's really started to accelerate and become so much more accessible to people. And I think there are, you know, who knows what's to come. And I think that's really, really exciting. But
obviously the other thing is our parents, like, they've been really patient with us. And, like, you know, sometimes you might ask your kids to help on Instagram to do something and they might huff and puff. And I'm the same, because it's normal to do that, because you don't understand why they might not know it. Well, how can you not know it, Dad? You just Control-Alt-Delete. It's fucking, like, it's easy. But then you got to remember, like, how patient they've been with us when we were born and when we're growing up. It's now our time to be patient with them.
It's a really good point.
It's like, it swings. It's a cycle, isn't it?
So what's your social media, Ty? Where can I find you? What's the
Instagram is Ty_Temel. And on there you can find, I've got a website as well, www.tytemel.com. But on the Instagram, I've got a link tree and it's got links to the podcast, my website, mailing list, anything that I'm currently doing and not doing right now. Everything's on there, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great to speak with you this morning. I've really appreciated your candour and your insight. It's been fabulous, and it's a great story. Very much look forward to watching you to continue to flourish. I look forward to the books. I look forward to reading them. I look forward to seeing where this journey could take you. And I think it would be really interesting that we might do this again sometime, because it's been great to have you on as a guest this morning. I've really, really greatly enjoyed it and learned a lot. So appreciate your time. Thank you. I wish you all the best for the future, and have a great day.
Thank you, Lee. Really, really appreciate it.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Astrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.